Hey everyone, this is Thrower. I just wanted to make a quick little video talking about The School by Donald Barthelme. And this story was from last week's module, so it was within the module on voice in fiction. And when we think about voice in fiction, we have a lot of stuff to cover: point of view, the voice of the narrator, what is the level of omniscience of that narrator. We think about things like diction and jargon. In fact, you did an assignment on jargon. So this story is couched within that particular learning module, and it's there for a very obvious reason. Hopefully by now, if not by the end of this video, you'll get it. There was also a question in a quiz for this module that said something to the effect of, there's a point in the story where the children are suddenly speaking like something other than children. I can't remember the exact way it was phrased, but there is a moment in the story where the voice of the children completely shifts. And I want to point out that moment, but just to get us kind of situated within the story, this is kind of the story where everything dies. And I made a list of these things, and I forgot how many things die in this story, but not in this specific order, but the things that die: snakes, trees, white mice, gerbils, salamander, tropical fish, puppy, Korean orphan, parents, grandparents, Matthew and Tony, and Billy's father. So all those things die throughout the course of the story. And I highlighted this phrase at the ending of the first paragraph: it was depressing, because it is pretty depressing. But we need to focus on this moment later in the story that quiz anchors on, and that this video wants to highlight, because this changes everything for the reading of this story. So we get to this part in the story where it says, one day we had a discussion in class. They asked me, where did they go? The trees, the salamander, the tropical fish, Edgar, the papas and mamas, Matthew and Tony, where did they go? And I said, I don't know. I don't know. And they said, who knows? And I said, nobody knows. And they said, is death that which gives meaning to life? And here we've shifted. We're off the planet Earth almost. Like, we are in a different story altogether. Up until this moment, everyone in the story stays in their lane as far as their voice. The children speak like children. Edgar, the teacher, speaks not just like a teacher, but really an informal teacher. If we go back to the very beginning of the story, this is Edgar. We had all these children out planting trees, because we figured that was part of their education, to see how, the root systems and also the sense of responsibility, taking care of things, being individually responsible. That's a really informal voice for a teacher. So everyone is really natural and sounds like a person until this one moment. Is death that which gives meaning to life? And I want you to think about how radical a shift this is for children, right? Not only is the subject matter quite strange, even in a story about death, the syntax of this, so the order of the words in the sentence, is also outside of its own time, right? If we were to shift the syntax into something that might sound a little bit more informal, it might sound like something like, does death give meaning to life? But again, they don't do that. They do, is death that which gives meaning to life? So a wild shift in voice. And I said, no, life is that which gives meaning to life. Then they said, but isn't death considered as a fundamental datum, the means by which the taken for granted mundanity of the everyday may be transcended in the direction of... And then they're interrupted by Edgar. Think again about this next phrase. Isn't death considered as a fundamental datum, the means by which the taken for granted mundanity of the everyday may be transcended in the direction of... So now we know this is remarkable for children to say, right? this is no longer the voice of children, really. So what is it the voice of? We looked at levels of diction. We're in a very heightened level of diction. We've talked about jargon in the module. We're using jargon here. So these are terms typically associated with ethics and philosophy. The taken for granted mundanity of the everyday transcended. This comes out of philosophy. And if you think about it, some of these other things about like truth and knowing, right, those are also the subjects of philosophy. Also in the module under questions to ask about point of view, I think it's question 6. The question is, how is the point of view complemented by style and diction? What can you determine about the speaker based upon the writer's use of style and diction? How does the way they say and think things inform readers about who they are? Well, if we take that question and look at statements like this, questions like this, we're kind of left thinking, well, we're not dealing with children anymore. So who are we dealing with? What are we talking about now? And the truth is, like, this is now an allegory. This is telling a story about something other than children. To go on, so Edgar interrupts. He says, yes, maybe. Death can be a means by which we transcend, right? And they said, we don't like it. And I said, that's sound. Another example here, sound is typically used when we talk about truth claims in philosophy. So something can be true and not sound, but sound things are true. It gets complicated, and I'm not a philosophy professor, but sound is something, is diction associated with truth claims in philosophy. So they keep going, and they said, will you make love now with Helen, our teaching assistant, so that we can see how it's done? We know you like Helen. They keep going. They go back and forth about this. Nobody seems to ask Helen, which I don't like. But they said, please make love with Helen. We require an assertion of value. Also something kids don't say. So what does it mean to make an assertion of value? Like, let's think about this. Let's deal with the real language of it, whether it's jargon laden or not, and it certainly is. Value is often kind of considered to be a judgment of whether things are good or bad, right? So to require an assertion of value is we require you to say something about whether something is good or bad. Here, I think it's kind of implied that they're looking for some kind of assertion of value about what things are good. Everything that has been good for them that is a living thing so far has died. So now they're requiring an assertion of value, as they say, we are frightened, right? We require an assertion of value. So here I'm looking at a very old article from the International Journal of Ethics. This was published in 1930. This is Charner Perry, Value as an Object of Any Interest. And here in paragraph 2, he makes some interesting statements. At least 2 characteristics seem essential to value. Value, like such terms as good, right, should, and ought, involves a claim on choice or preference. And apart from such claim, value loses the distinctive meaning given it by common usage. So first level of value, this is good, this is right. This restaurant is good, this is the right political decision to make, this is the right partner for me in my life. And if we think about it outside of that context, we lose the distinctive meaning of common usage. So the common usage is to think of it in those terms. It goes on, to assert a value is always to present at least a partial answer to the question, what shall I admire, what shall I choose, what shall I respect, etc. And there, I think it's more like, what shall we look to? It's almost like saying, what shall I look to find the meaning of life? Or what can make me unfrightened, maybe? And Perry goes on, if an assertion is relevant to none of these questions, then it is not an assertion about the nature of value. The second characteristic of value lies in the fact that the claim on choice involved in an assertion of value purports to be reasonable or such that reasons may be given for it. Otherwise, the claim is merely an arrogant demand, an attempt to impose our desires upon the choices of other people. So, that's really interesting because, are the kids asking for something that is reasonable? Is there requirement for an assertion of value something that will really give them value? Is it really about the nature of value? Is comfort about the nature of value? And you can see we're getting into really heavy questions. These are questions of philosophy, questions of the meaning of life. If we go back to the story, Edgar responds with, "I said they shouldn't be frightened, although I am often frightened." And this to me feels like what Perry was saying, like there's a bit of dishonesty here, at least in that part of the statement. Don't be frightened, although to be honest, I'm frightened myself. But the second half here, there was value everywhere. That may be a better assertion of value than anything, especially if you think about the context of the story, because what if Edgar makes love with Helen? Do the kids require to see the act of lovemaking? Or are the kids hoping for lovemaking followed by the birth of a child, right? These are children, and I don't get the sense that they really understand like where living things come from in a sexual way, right? So they're not asking to see sex, for example. Please make love with Helen. These kids have probably heard, where do babies come from? Well, your mother and I make love, blah, 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 right? You get it. So what do they really want, right? They start to get excited when Helen comes and embraces Edgar, right? But everything is interrupted because there's a knock at the door. I opened the door and the new gerbil walked in. The children cheered wildly. So here is our end. But why do we end this way? What has just happened at the end of this story? It's so wild. So what we might think is the children require an assertion of value. Edgar doesn't seem to know what to do, although he tells them there's value everywhere. And I think we almost need to go back to the very beginning, because being individually responsible requires us to find value somewhere. It's okay not to know, and it's okay to be frightened, but there is value everywhere. And when we start putting value in one place, for example, the new gerbil, we're suddenly back to dealing with children again. The children cheer because it's a new living thing for them to put their faith into. However, as readers of the story, we can imagine what would happen if this story went on for one more paragraph. What's going to happen to that new gerbil? In a way, we're going to be back in the same spot as we were in before. We're adding to the list of dead things. New gerbil is on the list. And the children seem to have not learned anything from this little exercise with the high level of diction and the jargon related to philosophy. They haven't learned that value comes from everywhere, even from death, as they kind of assert up here. Is death that which gives meaning to life? Well, in some ways, Edgar's wrong, right? Life is that which gives meaning to life, of course, but also death is that which gives meaning to life, because death is a part of life. So, in a way, there's a lesson playing out here. It's almost didactic, but it's underhanded. This is not how you teach someone a lesson. You have to read really carefully and think deeply about this story in order to get to the lesson that is here, and it's almost hidden. And we see it only when we recognize, hey, if this new gerbil walks in, well, it's not walking out. So I hope that's been a little bit helpful. Certainly a wild story. I hope everyone is well. Talk to you later. Bye.